of Orthodox spirituality.
Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.
Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy.
Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy.
Hello, dear listeners. We are continuing to read from the book Spiritual Struggle, the third volume in the series, Spiritual Counsels, by Saint Paisios. Chapter 2, Nurturing the Conscience. Let us reflect on our conscience. The good God provided Adam and Eve with a conscience, the first divine law. This conscience was ingrained deeply into their hearts, and ever since then, every human being receives it as an inheritance from his parents. If someone does not act properly, this conscience will work from within to censure and guide him to repentance. But one must carry out the appropriate spiritual work by reflecting carefully on his conscience, in order always to be able to hear its voice. If one does not study and reflect carefully upon his conscience, he won't be able to benefit from spiritual studies or from counsels of holy elders. He won't even be able to observe God's commandments. Yeroda, is it possible for someone to be totally unaware of himself and be blind to the fact that he is going in the wrong direction? When someone does not observe himself carefully and does not dust off his conscience from time to time, then it will gradually grow rusty and insensitive. He will sin as if nothing is going on. Yeroda, could you tell us something about nurturing the conscience? In order for one to be certain that he's acting in accordance with his conscience, he has to observe himself carefully and reveal his inner self to his spiritual father. One can betray his conscience and just assume that he's on the right track. One may create a faulty conscience, and even though he may not have committed a crime, may consider himself a benefactor. Or he may even make his conscience overly sensitive and harm himself. Yeroda, I tend to condemn myself inwardly without the necessary self-scrutiny. Could it be that I do not censure myself because I have become insensitive? This requires a lot of attention. You see, when someone commits a sin for the first time, he feels a certain censure, a certain amount of grief. If he repeats the sin a second time, he feels a lesser degree of censure. And if he remains negligent and repeatedly sins, his conscience becomes callous. For example, when you point out to some people their error, they will change the subject so that they won't be troubled by their conscience, much like the Hindus seeking nirvana. The elder is referring here to the technical means of yoga and to meditations utilized by the followers of Eastern religions in order to reach a state which they consider to be redemption and which they call nirvana. A young man in the Himalayas killed 5 Italian mountain climbers, and after burying them, began doing self-concentration exercises. He sat down and for 2 hours repeated incantations that would lead him into such a state of forgetfulness that he wouldn't be troubled by his conscience. Let's say that I scold one of the sisters for doing something wrong. If this sister is not doing her spiritual discipline correctly and is not seeking to improve herself, she may at that moment tell me something totally irrelevant, such as, "Today we need to ring the bell for Vespers earlier," just to change the subject. After that, the devil will confuse her more and suggest, "Don't worry, you did this for the benefit of the elder, so he would not be grieved." The devil himself justifies her action. She doesn't admit to herself that she did it to violate her conscience, but rather she says to herself, "I did it so I wouldn't grieve the elder." Do you see what the little devil can do to confuse us? Refined work indeed. He simply tunes into another frequency so that we will not see our faults. Yaroda, is it possible for one to be sensitive to details and yet be unable to detect his greater faults? Of course it's possible. Once a spiritual father, a friend of mine, related this incident to me. A woman went to make her confession to him and was constantly saying in tears, "I didn't want to kill her." He reassured her, "Look, if you repent, God will forgive. He forgave King David." "Yes, but I didn't mean to kill her," she continued to repeat tearfully. The spiritual father then asked her, "How did you happen to kill her?" "Well, as I was cleaning the house, I hit her with the towel and killed that poor fly. I didn't mean to kill her." In the meantime, this same woman made fun of her husband, neglected her children, had virtually abandoned her family, and instead wandered the streets. And these things were mentioned as if they had no significance. When the spiritual father advised a severe rule for those serious transgressions, she retorted, "And why is a rule required for those things? Now tell me, how can such a person be helped?" Repressed conscience. Yaronda, when people tell me that desire is in the subconscious, but you don't realize it, how can I realize it? If you notice, you'll see how even when you say that there's nothing wrong, still you don't feel well. This is why we need examinations. When someone doesn't feel well, let's say he feels under the weather, he can undergo certain examinations, such as blood tests, x-rays, and so on, to diagnose the illness. If you see that you're not at peace but are troubled, you should know that there's something that has not been taken care of inside of you, which you must find and take care of. Let's say you make a mistake. You are troubled, but you don't confess the mistake. Then something enjoyable takes place and you are happy. This joy covers the grief from your mistake, and you gradually forget it. You do not see it because it was covered and repressed by the joy you felt. The joys cover the mistake and push it further and deeper down, but it still continues to work internally. This is how a person begins to harden, by violating his conscience and covering his heart. Then the devil comes to justify everything for him. This is nothing, this is normal. But there is no peace in the man's heart simply because the cause of the problem has been repressed underneath. He feels troubled and has no inner serenity. He lives in a constant state of anxiety and feels tormented. He cannot find what is at fault because his faults have been repressed and covered up. He doesn't understand that he's suffering because of his sins. Yeronda, can such a person be helped if you point out to him the cause of his troubles? Look, this requires care, because when things are put in their proper place, the conscience is awakened and the censuring starts. And if a person is not humbled, he can be driven to despair because he's unable to bear the truth. But if one is humbled, he can be helped indeed. Yeronda, are there people who are born with a hardened conscience? No, there are no people who are born with a hardened conscience. God has not created such a conscience. But when someone covers up his faults, his conscience will in time become rusty and hardened and unable to break through and censure him for these faults. In other words, Yeronda, such a person becomes autonomous, self-ruling, making his own laws. Exactly, and it's horrible. Is it self-deception? Of course, it's self-deception. The faulty conscience. Yeronda, you have often said that a person must be careful not to create a faulty conscience. How is a faulty conscience created? When someone lulls to sleep his self-accusing thoughts, he represses his conscience. And when one lulls to sleep or refuses to acknowledge these self-accusations from his conscience for a long period of time, he creates another, his own a la carte conscience, that is, a faulty conscience. But such a person has no inner peace, because a faulty conscience cannot bring about inner peace. You see, even when someone makes a mistake and another person tells him, "It's not your fault, why are you worried?" Or even if he pretends not to have noticed his mistake, again, he will not find any inner peace. There are some who go to consult certain gurus and so on, and when they realize that things are not going well, they will come to ask me. And while I tell them something to help them, they still insist, "No, what I believe is correct." But if what you believe is correct, then why do you come and ask me? Even though they are not at peace with what is wrong, they insist and keep on trying to find a false peace one way or another, but they cannot find true peace. Yeronda, can someone go through a whole lifetime with a faulty conscience? If one believes in his own thoughts, he can. How can one correct his faulty conscience? By thinking humbly, by not trusting in his own thoughts, and by discussing them with his spiritual father. Yeronda, when a person has a certain sensitivity, can he create a faulty conscience? In order to create a faulty conscience, the sensitivity he has must not be a good one. One faulty thought will lead to another. Some people say, "I am rather sensitive," but will go and treat other people harshly and scold them without reason. Yeronda, can we say that the conscience of those people who are always justifying themselves has become hardened? He who justifies himself still has a degree of censure in him. He is not totally insensitive. And when someone is not insensitive, he feels some pain for his faults. And in time, divine consolation comes. But whoever develops a faulty conscience will eventually become insensitive, will even take pride in doing harm. I have seen people who have committed crimes and brag about them as if they were great achievements. You see, If one develops a faulty conscience, this is more than merely losing the sense of right and wrong. When I was at the monastery of Stomion in Konica, someone came and said to me, "I want to confess to you." I said, "I am not a priest to do that." "No, I want to tell you everything," he insisted. There were also some women with us who had come up to the monastery to worship. I said to them, "It's better that you leave now." But he interrupted and said to them, "No, it's all right. Stay, please, sit down." And he began relating what he had done in his youth. "When I was young, I went to learn the trade of cobbler, but I was always sleepy because during the night I would go out with a gang and commit break-ins. There was an unscrupulous Tsaousis in the area who prodded us. In the past in Greece, a Tsaousis was a leader of a group with political and military authority. He'd tell us, "I want 2 rams, go and steal them for me, and take whatever else you want for yourselves." We would go into Christian homes. I'd take off my cloak, hit the dogs with a rod I carried with me, and then enter. Then we would steal the 2 rams and as many lambs as we could. We would give the rams to him and hide the lambs in our own stables. The Tsaousis would then lock us up in his jail immediately. The owners who had seen us stealing from their flocks would then go to the police in the morning and report, "So-and-so came during the night and stole our sheep." But the Tsaousis would defend us by saying, "But they're locked up in my jail. Why do you accuse them wrongfully?" And the wrong people would be punished. Once we went to a flock which was being watched by a very tall young shepherd and his father. "How can we now enter the fold with those 2 guarding the flock? They will throw us out like matchsticks," the others said to me. So I took an old musket and fired at the young shepherd, sending him to the ground. Then I tied the father to a crabapple tree. Then we started stealing away. And he was laughing, describing all this as if it was some sort of great achievement. See where a faulty conscience can lead you? I also met a policeman who was serving in the transfer department. This poor man was constantly weeping because he had once accompanied an inmate from one prison to another, where he was then court-martialed and executed for his many crimes. This policeman sought out the relatives of the executed man and asked them for forgiveness. But a brother of his, who had been in America, answered him, "If they had executed him sooner, many of his victims would have been spared." Do you see the difference between the 2 situations? One man considered himself guilty for simply having accompanied the prisoner to his execution, while the other man bragged about his crimes as if they were achievements. Peace cannot come from what is false. Yeroda, if someone has created his own inner world because he believes in his own thoughts, can he be helped by the prayers of others? What need does he have of help if he has been able to make his own world? It's no small thing to create a whole world of your own. Look, if someone creates his own mental world, do you suppose that he can find inner peace? Do you think he can feel happiness? His world is a lie. A lie cannot give joy and peace. Let's say that one tells a lie in order to protect another. He may even save a person from death. But the lie he has told is still half a sin. Or again, one may lie with good intentions in order to prevent greater harm. For example, someone you know comes to the monastery secretly to talk about a problem in his family and find some relief. And let's say that his brother comes and asks you, "Has my brother been here?" If you tell him he has, then a problem can be created by exposing the brother. So you tell him, "I don't know." For if you say, "Yes, he has," this could lead to a serious problem. This is different, but one must be careful, for if this happens often, it will escalate to something more serious. One could become used to resorting to lies and eventually acquire a faulty conscience. One can even get to the point of making up stories that aren't true without ever being troubled by his conscience. This can even be developed into a science. Oh, how creative some people can be in making things up if they work at it. They can very artfully weave quite convincing fables. A friend had come to my Kalivi once. A group of people were there, friends of a young man I had previously helped. This poor young man, while smart and good, was also a little lazy and didn't like to work much. He'd grown accustomed to wandering around. For 4 years, I tried to bring him around. So I told his town people who were there, "Try to find this young man a job." I've tried other times to help him. I had even sent him to some friends of mine in Castoria to learn the trade of furrier, but he left them. He is young. It would be a shame if he wasted his life wandering around. He only has his mother. His father has passed away. And that's when this person in the group, whom I knew, started saying to the others, "Yes, we had made arrangements with Father Paisios for this young man to go and learn the trade of furrier. But when he left, I spent so much money sending telegrams to his bosses telling them not to worry." But anyway, that's not the point here. I had told Father Paisios then that this young man cannot be corrected. And then I thought to myself, what is this man talking about? But I did not want to say anything at that time to embarrass him. Even though he was hearing about the young man for the first time, he was still able to fabricate a whole story about how we both tried together to help that young man and so forth. I was really troubled by the way he carried on. "Did he say these things in front of you?" "Yes, in front of me and all the others too." "And what did he get out of this?" What did he get out of this? At that moment, he felt a sort of selfish satisfaction. But later, he would be tormented. He had no inner peace. When a person tells a story that is somewhat exaggerated, yes, garnished, is it all done out of vainglory? What else could it be? Out of vainglory and egoism. How can such a person be helped to correct himself? He must stop lying. He must know that a lie, even when there are excuses, is half a sin. Yeroda, is it possible that we may be given something simply out of goodness, but we think that it was given to us because we are worthy of it? Look, if I tell you, you, sister, can reach the spiritual level of your patron saint, you may laugh a little over that, but you will not be at peace with it. What is false cannot bring peace, because it does not have the grace of God. And the unfair person who wrongs others and says, "This is mine," doesn't find any peace. Take, for example, the Turks in Constantinople. Even though so many years have passed since the fall of the city, when they see Greek visitors, they feel like they are holding on to something that they have stolen and look upon the Greeks as the rightful owners. And these are Turks, and so many years have passed since then. A right conscience guides man correctly. There is no greater good for man than to have his conscience at peace. It is a great thing not to be censured by your conscience, by thinking that you could have done something more but chose not to. That's when man can have a constant inner joy, and his whole life can become a celebration. It is this inner joy that provides us with spiritual strength. Yeroda, how can we understand that what we do is pleasing to God? Man has an inner awareness of it. He senses it. Does his own inner awareness suffice, or does he need the witness of others? I'm referring to those who have a healthy and good conscience, and not to those who have a faulty conscience. A good conscience informs the person properly. Then a person feels a certain security, a certain hope, and says with humility, I am not worthy of paradise. I am bound for hell, but I believe the love and mercy of God will not abandon me. He feels this because he is actually struggling. He is not standing idle, doing nothing, and saying, God will save me. The conscience, what an awesome gift. There is no greater fire, no greater hell than the burning of the conscience. There is no greater, more torturous remorse than the remorse of the conscience. The condemned will suffer eternally because they will be tormented by the thought that they have lost the gifts of paradise for the sake of few years of life on earth, even though those too were filled with the pangs of remorse and anxiety. Even the passions will not be satisfied, and this will be yet another torment. Yeroda, how can a monastic live in reality the martyrdom of the conscience? The martyrdom of the conscience is for everyone. It's not only for monks and nuns. Monks and nuns also have the sweet martyrdom of their ascetic discipline. In reality, however, there is no martyrdom of the conscience for those who struggle properly. For the more a person suffers spiritually, that is, the more one suffers either for his many faults or because he participates in the passion of the Lord, the more he is rewarded with divine consolation. Even if one has sorrows, griefs, and troubles, he, at the same time, senses divine consolation when his conscience is clear and at peace. Dear listeners, our time is up. Thank you for listening. We will continue once again where we left off in our next show. Until then, be well.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have
Readings of Orthodox Spirituality.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.